watching Channel Africa Conversations.
We also have two global institutions, one for law maritime and the other one in a more broader postgraduate degrees, all related to maritime, where the African continent has benefited greatly throughout the more than 30 years that these institutions have been operating and educating maritime professionals. Our focus is that they will go back to the administrations, share the knowledge and expertise, and with that enhance the governance that we require.
Hello and welcome to Channel Africa Conversations. I'm Peter Ndoro. Today we focus on the maritime sector, a cornerstone of Africa's economy and global trade. Maritime security and development are critical to the region, particularly in the Western Indian Ocean and Gulf of Aden, where challenges like piracy and geopolitical tensions persist. Well, to talk about these issues, I spoke to Mr. Arsenio Dominguez, who's the Secretary General of the International Maritime Organization, the IMO, and that's a UN agency responsible for global maritime affairs. Mr. Dominguez recently attended two significant conferences in Tanzania, a regional cooperation meeting of Djibouti Code and conduct signatories focused on maritime security, and a gathering of maritime administrations discussing Africa's maritime development. Mr. Dominguez, thank you very much indeed for joining us on Channel Africa Conversations.
It's my pleasure to being with you.
Mr. Dominguez, you attended two major conferences recently, both with a focus on Africa, security and general maritime issues. I wonder if you could take us through, in broad terms, what did you take out of those conferences?
Thank you. The first one I'm going to address is the one on security, and this is based on the implementation of the Djibouti Code of Conduct. The most important topic that came out there is the need to enhance the governance in the region, the maritime governance, particularly when it comes to security, in order for the countries to be prepared for when situations such as the one affecting the Red Sea occurs. And of course, there's an action plan where the organization, the International Maritime Organization, can assist the countries in implementation. The further support that is being received from different naval forces from different countries, which it's also interacting with the region. And I want to highlight that in particular, when it comes to South Africa, it's taking over the chairmanship of the Friends of the Djibouti Code of Conduct. So they're very much active in implementing the action plans in order to get those tangible results that everybody is looking forward to enhance maritime security and safety in the region. The second one was more related to the maritime administrations, and this is on a broader spectrum, not just to cover the aspects of safety and security, but also the work that IMO is doing on the human element, particularly the well-being, protection, and training of seafarers, as well as the environment.
All right, let's go back to the Djibouti Code, and I just wonder how much progress is being made there.
When it comes to the Djibouti Code of Conduct, there has been progress in relation to the legislation that needs to be established, the information sharing centers within the code that will assist the countries in sharing this information that is relevant for ship transit in the regions and for them to have all the necessary awareness. But we still need additional investment from the countries and from external donors in relation to some infrastructure that is required in order to enhance the safety of navigation, as well as the awareness and all the mechanisms that we have in place to safeguard the monitoring and verification and tracking of ships when they are traveling in the area. Apart from that, enhancing the governance and the capabilities of the personnel in the different maritime administrations that work on behalf of the countries in order, again, to implement the code.
What do you see as the most critical actions that are required to bolster security in the region, maritime security in the region?
I'm going to use a word that I don't just put forward as a statement, but is better collaboration. There are areas where the countries, particularly in the sharing of information and preparedness, that they can enhance in order to support each other when there are common problems or common challenges that they all face. The second one is the investment that needs to occur, again, as I mentioned earlier, not just from external actors, but also for the governments themselves, in order to focus on a better implementation of the IMO instruments, the measures that would guarantee that trades continue to flow in a safe manner and that will not have the negative consequences.
Talk to us a little bit about what came out of the discussions and how geographical tensions, such as those around the Red Sea crisis, the Houthi-led attacks, and how they're affecting maritime security in Africa generally. What strategies have been employed to mitigate that?
We all been affected by the situation in the Red Sea, and of course, I continue to condemn those attacks, and in particularly the negative effect that has on seafarers, and the fact that it's been more than a year since the Galaxy leader and its crew remains captive in the region in Yemen. There's several actions that the organization has taken in relation to operational advice in requesting ship operators to carry out risk assessments before they sail through the area. Naval assets from different countries, including the European Union, that are providing that additional assistance. From our side, we also providing technical support and in relation to preparedness for any oil pollution or environmental accident that may take place. But we need to find and go back to normality, because between 12 and 15% of world trade goes through the Red Sea. This is affecting countries in Africa. In East Africa, particularly Egypt, has seen a reduction of more than 60% of transit through the Suez Canal, which of course is impacting directly in the national economy. We see the countries around the Cape of Good Hope in South Africa that of course have additional pressures in order to provide the necessary goods and provisions to countries, to ships to operate in order to maintain the safety aspects, as well as any concerns that can be perceived if piracy starts to come back into the region, not just in West Africa, in the Gulf of Guinea, but also off the coast of Somalia and the Gulf of Aden. So all these parameters just put into perspective the challenges that the shipping industry is facing, the fact that the organization continues to work in decarbonizing the sector, but by taking longer routes, we of course increase the emissions, and globally the impact on the economy. Insurance costs have gone up, as well as the cost of the cargo, the transits, and this could be, goes for twice and three times what the regular costs are, which then the negative impact goes directly into the end consumer.
And have you seen these affecting the African coastline economies? A lot of these ships are not African, but they do make services of our coastline. And I just wonder how our economies on the continent are being affected by all of these issues.
There are several ways and several aspects to look into those economies. And of course, if you take into account a country like Liberia, which is an African country, which right now is actually the biggest register in the world, they still enhancing their productivity and the way that the positive economic impact has on the flag increasing there. We see other countries in Africa, such as Nigeria as well, that are increasing their fleet. Shipping is global, so we don't really attach the nationality of the ship directly to a country where there is a national or an international registry, because of the modalities of how we operate. We've seen increase in some areas of the economy when it comes to servicing goods, but also at the same time, we need to have the comparison into the negative effect that it has on the pressure that it puts in being ready, not just to protect the coastlines, the environment, etc., but also the additional strength in probably increasing the infrastructure in order to service ships that normally will not be calling in the region.
How have you been assisting as the IMO, helping Africa develop its blue economies? That's a big buzzword, particularly here in South Africa. But I guess, with thousands and thousands of kilometers of coastline, there's a whole economic opportunity for African countries. How have you been assisting our continent in that regard?
The first instance is with the regulations that we have had in place for several years and the ones that we continue to introduce in order to protect that pristine environment from ballast water, for transfer of species, biofouling, as well as the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. And of course, we pay particular attention with the oceans. Every year, we dedicate the World Maritime thing to a topic that is very much linked to the work of the organization. And for 2025, our focus is going to be on the ocean, as well as because we're having the third United Nations Ocean Conference taking place in June. And in this respect, our program of technical cooperation and capacity buildings, as well as the different programs that we have with countries in the region as pilot countries, they implement the IMO conventions. They look into the opportunities that can arise, not just for compliance with the rules, but also the way that it enhances the economy and brings additional investment in order to utilize better the national resources and in a more sustainable manner. And that's one of the core areas of the work of IMO in supporting the member states.
Looking at policy across the continent, what are the biggest challenges do you think that our African states are facing in terms of policy and trying to align them with global standards?
I would say one that probably affects Africa and affects others as well, and is the transition to decarbonize the sector. And it's because of the investment that needs to go in hand with the way that we are progressing with the regulatory process. But IMO, after adopting the GHG 2023 strategy in July last year, of course, is now focusing on the technical and the economic measures. And these economic measures will bring opportunities at the same time to the African continent in particular, as one that is full of natural resources, one that can produce renewable energy. And there's already a few projects with countries in the region that are focusing on the production as well as the supply of green hydrogen and other green fuels such as ammonia and biofuels. So this is where we look into the challenges that the continent is facing and the different nations, but at the same time, we also focus on tapping on those opportunities. Beyond that, we need to enhance the governance within the different maritime administrations in order to have a more harmonized and a more efficient implementation of IMO instruments, so we can reduce aspects like fraudulent registrations, abandonment of seafarers, better protection of the ecosystem, and the way that flag states increases in numbers, they also have a responsibility to have better inspections to avoid ships being prone to casualties and accidents.
How big of a problem is governance on the continent? You've mentioned fraud as one of the issues. How big is the problem that we're facing?
It's a global problem, but it's something that we continue to face. It's one that the more that we focus on enhancing the governance capabilities of the countries and the implementation of the IMO regulations, the more that we will see the changes. And that's why this is one of the key priorities that I have introduced as part of the technical cooperation and capacity buildings that we provide. We understand the fact that countries need a system, and of course, there's continuity in building on the necessary human resources in order to carry out this required implementation of IMO instruments. And for that, we also have two global institutions, one for law maritime and the other one in a more broader postgraduate degrees, all related to maritime, where the African continent has benefited greatly throughout the more than 30 years that these institutions have been operating and educating maritime professionals. Our focus is that they will go back to the administrations, share the knowledge and expertise, and that enhance the governance that we require.
Going back a little bit to the security issues, as a journalist, I'm constantly dealing with stories around piracy. And I just wonder what global effort can be put together to assist, particularly on Africa's coastlines.
We already have actually global guidance in relation to piracy that we developed around 2010, when, of course, we have the heights of the attacks of piracy off the coast of Somalia and the Gulf of Aden, and they still remain valid. And in fact, some of those actions have been applicable and has helped for ships transiting the Red Sea with the current crisis. We continue to get feedback from piracies in different parts of the world, and together with the shipping industry, there's the continuous development, updating, and implementation of what it's called best management practices, and they are the ones that have allowed us to actually reduce the number of piracy incidents year after year for the last 5 years.
And then there's the big issue for us on the continent, infrastructure and capacity. How do we get this right? Can we get help from further afield?
The answer for me is yes. There's assistance from IMO, and I'm going to be very specific on this, through the green transition. Once we adopt by the end of next year the technical and economic measures, the pricing mechanism that is going to support the transition, this is where the support for the infrastructure will come from in relation to all those areas that are related to shipping and shipping trade. So here is where we're already discussing with the countries and analyzing what would be the needs and how we're going to be able through different projects and grants to support the implementation of the IMO instruments and allow the countries to also be part of these transitions. The UN continues to refer to leaving no one behind, and that's what IMO is taking this pathway, where it's not just the implementation of the regulations, but it's also the areas where we can financially support through the collections of the revenues that the ships will be able to provide. Apart from that, it's also the strength and the assistance that we can provide for the countries in Africa to develop the national maritime strategies. And from there, the will and the hope is that they also align their budgetary preparations as well as the areas where they are looking for investment to demonstrate why it is good to invest either foreign investment or their own national investment from their own revenues and the resources that they have, in order again to just tap on the opportunities and be very focused and specific on how much shipping can actually contribute to economy, because it's not just by being a big flag with several ships registered, but it's also on the human resources and the trade and the assistance that the ships can provide to enhance all those different communities that are related to the shipping network. We have to recognize a ship, everything that we use at home and all around the countries, at some point, one of the goods of one of the materials has been transported by ship.
Are you finding that our African leaders, governments are taking advice, particularly when it comes to policy and moving forwards? Are they listening? Are they putting it higher up on the agenda?
That's one of my goals, and I continue to do this. And it was one of the reasons why it was important for me to participate at the gathering last week with the maritime administrations, to send my message very clear that I'm ready to support and help them in order to tap on these opportunities, to get maritime high on the agenda, and not to dismiss everything that it can bring to assist the economies of the countries. I'm ready to provide the support through the organization. And I will continue to persist, not just in Africa, but this is a call that I have for every single member state at IMO, to always keep shipping high on the agenda. And this is, again, my focus is to getting the results. Any activities that we carried out, any requests for assistance, I always link that to specific objectives and targets so we can measure the effectiveness and provide better assistance in the future on how to achieve the goals and the results that we are looking forward to.
What is the international community asking of us as a continent? What do they want us to do more to help enable the global maritime industry?
I will put it very closely to the question that that I just answered, and is that to continue to increase the visibility of shipping, the importance of shipping, and to get it high on the agenda. Invest particularly on the governance and the human resources for the country to continue to develop this maritime domain. Now that we've seen not just on the environment, but also in automation, all the raw materials, the natural resources that are required, that Africa is rich on, and all the potential with a very wide population, professional population, and with the capacity to train even more people to actually be part of this game. So there's a lot of calls from the industry as well for Africa to tap on these opportunities, take the first steps, and we will continue to support in this aspect.
One of the things that I found on the continent is that we're pretty good at innovation. And I just wonder if there are things that we're doing well that perhaps we are feeding into the global sector.
On that one, I think it's the advertising. It's being more visible on everything that you're doing. If I look into the green transition, there's several countries that are already very well advanced in relation to how they are moving away from fossil fuels and into the new technologies and the new alternative fuels that will be required for the industry, not just for the bunkering, but also on the production, as well as the supply aspects of it, and preparing equally for any accidents, any risks, and any safety measures. So in this respect, once more countries from the regions continue to tap on what you all have and demonstrate and be more visible into where you're heading with this, the more that it will be recognized, all the capabilities and innovation that you have. And of course, at IMO, I'm ready to continue to receive those good new ideas in order to improve our regulatory process.
And perhaps as we start to wrap up this conversation, you've been in your job nearly a year now, and I just wonder, what have become the big issues for you, and what are your ambitions going forward, particularly when it comes to our continent?
The biggest issue has been the geopolitics and the negative effect that they have in shipping. We just talked about earlier about the negative effect that is having on seafarers and on trade, the very well-established trade routes in the region. So that has been the main focus in relation to the concerns. And I look forward as we come into 2025 to find those solutions that are lying beyond IMO, but that then would allow shipping to go back and continues to trade and provide to everyone. At the same time, increasing in diversity and inclusion, and particularly the role of women in maritime. And this is one of those aspects where Africa has a lot of potential and where we can tap on. And I look forward for the continent as a whole to embrace the youth as well as diversity, and that the more women we get into the maritime sector, which of course allow us to increase the number of professional, those initiatives that you say that the continent is ready to provide. So every help that I get in those very global aspects will be very welcome. And I can't let out the protection of the environment. It's going to be one of the key negotiations at IMO, and I continue to be very confident in the way that all the countries and the support from the African nations in their engagement towards the finalization of the technical and economic mechanisms that would allow the shipping transition to be a pioneer when it comes to decarbonizing and protecting the environment.
Mr. Arsenio Dominguez, the Secretary General of the International Maritime Organization, thank you very, very much indeed for joining us on Channel Africa Conversations.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure.
And that's how we come to the end of today's edition of Channel Africa Conversations. Thanks very much indeed for tuning in. Before we go, though, please, we'd love to hear from you. So engage with us on our social media pages. They're on your screen now. And we'd also like to hear what you think about the conversations we're having. Who would you like to have conversations with, and what conversations do you want these to be about? Drop us a note in the comment section below. Until the next time, take care.